I think this is what the West needs to actually fight back against these terrible ideologies that they've undermined our sense of self-confidence. The whole idea about what made...
This is exactly what the West needs to counter the harmful ideologies that have eroded our confidence and sense of purpose. The core idea of what once defined us. It's a real pity Liz Truss didn't have the opportunity to finish her tenure as Prime Minister. She had the potential to turn things around for both the Conservative Party and the country. Let's be frank, she displayed more courage than many of the men in her party today. Truss didn't shy away from confronting Keir Starmer, going as far as to brand him the most dangerous man in Britain. Now, it seems Starmer is scrambling. But what led her to make such a striking statement? Let's delve into it. The new woke left is, at its heart, intolerant and authoritarian. Their aim is to impose their worldview on everyone, and thankfully, Elon Musk has taken a stand against these forces, including Starmer. Say what you like about Musk, but taking on the world's most successful entrepreneur is quite the misstep for Starmer, especially given his rather shaky start in office. Liz Truss is undeniably a highly intelligent figure with principles that genuinely prioritise the British people. Her clear vision made her loss as Prime Minister a significant setback for the nation. It's no surprise she wasn't given a proper chance. She was far too sharp, forthright, and capable for the establishment to handle. In her first interview since Donald Trump's re-election, the former UK Prime Minister weighed in on key issues, including the current government. Truss criticised Starmer's assault on free speech and praised Elon Musk for defending fundamental human rights on a global scale. Truss remarked on the absurdity of Starmer taking on someone as influential as Musk. It was a decision that could only harm Starmer and, by extension, the country. Make no mistake, those involved in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held in custody, charges will follow, and convictions will be secured. There will be consequences for anyone who took part in this chaos, directly or otherwise. Starmer's approach to free speech is deeply concerning and borders on authoritarianism. Within mere months of becoming Prime Minister, his disdain for open discourse has been starkly apparent. When Elon Musk criticised Starmer's handling of the UK riots, Starmer's reaction was telling. Rather than addressing the critique, he deflected by blaming content on X for inciting unrest. Worse still, he has proposed stricter social media regulations aimed at curbing anything vaguely classified as legal but harmful. Such measures would likely lead to increased censorship on social platforms, posing a severe threat to free speech. This organised, violent thuggery has no place in our streets or online, with allowing social media content to be assessed solely on its legality. Yet, the principle is clear. If it isn't illegal, it should remain permissible. We cannot allow the government to act as a gatekeeper, determining which posts are acceptable and which are not. Starmer's response during the pandemic raised eyebrows, leaving many questioning his perspective and decisions. The Prime Minister's crackdown on free speech is deeply alarming. Since August, the UK has witnessed the most significant assault on freedom of expression since Oliver Cromwell banned theatre performances in 1642. This heavy-handed approach seems less about addressing perpetrators and more about managing public opinion, a tactic that only fosters distrust. The tragic killing of 3 children in Southport sparked riots across the UK, and Starmer was quick to blame social media for spreading false and harmful information. He called for increased monitoring of online activity to curb potential unrest, resulting in severe penalties. One man was imprisoned for 18 months for sharing an offensive Facebook post. Another received 3 years for criticising the government in his posts. A third man was jailed for shouting, "Who the heck is Allah?" Stephen Parkinson, Director of Public Prosecutions, issued a stark warning that anyone sharing videos of the riots online could face legal repercussions. People may think they're causing no harm, but they are. and they will face consequences, he said. This reflects a glaring double standard. The riots and the policing of platforms like Twitter have highlighted just how disconnected this approach is from what the British public actually wants. The Islamist threat in this country is undeniable. It remains the most significant terrorist concern. Yet, Starmer's language and actions resemble those of an authoritarian regime rather than a nation with a proud democratic heritage. This climate has left many in the UK feeling fearful. Thousands are now anxious about the possibility of imprisonment simply for posting something deemed politically incorrect online. Such an environment is not only oppressive, but fundamentally at odds with the freedoms we value. This cannot continue. We must remind the Prime Minister, a former human rights lawyer, that free speech is the bedrock of all our rights. Without it, we lose the ability to defend any others. Yet, how much time does Keir Starmer dedicate to this fundamental issue compared to his focus on the far-right threat? The imbalance is glaring, and people are noticing. During the election campaign, concerns about transparency grew louder, particularly regarding the Southport attack. Trust in the government has been shaken as questions arise over what Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper knew about the suspect in the Southport killings. Many are asking how they could only have been informed a week later. It simply doesn't add up. Dame Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, has joined Tory leadership candidates in demanding that the Prime Minister and Home Secretary clarify what they knew and when they knew it, prior to the charges becoming public. The Islamist threat is real and pressing. People see it clearly, but the government's reluctance to share the truth fosters suspicion. By keeping information out of the media to manage public opinion, the government risks eroding trust, a self-defeating approach that only alienates the public further. Jonathan Hall KC, the independent reviewer of terror laws, has urged ministers to adopt greater transparency regarding terrorism cases. This call follows revelations that senior government officials were aware weeks in advance of the charges brought against Axel Ruda Cubana. He stands accused of killing Alice da Silva Aguiar, aged 9, BB King, aged 6, and Elsie Stankham, aged 7, during a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport on 29 July. Government sources confirmed that legal authorities were consulted about charging Ruda Cubana, 18, under the Biological Weapons Act for allegedly producing the deadly toxin ricin. He also faces charges for possession of an Al-Qaeda terrorist training manual titled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants. The issue lies in the system, and Keir Starmer is undeniably a product of it. As a former Director of Public Prosecutions, his approach reflects the opacity and lack of accountability inherent in the establishment. That lack of clarity is deeply unsettling, and it only fuels public frustration. The lack of accountability among cabinet ministers regarding appointments, whether it's judiciary roles or the management of criminal justice, is deeply concerning. Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch have accused both the police and the government of withholding key details about Ruda Cubana from the public. They are demanding explanations for why certain facts appear to have been concealed. Dame Priti Patel described the Southport incident as a devastating tragedy that shook the nation. At the time, both the public and politicians were pressing for answers. Yet the government chose not to address the matter in Parliament or confront the hard questions it raised. It's difficult to believe that the police, the Home Secretary, and the Prime Minister were unaware of the suspect's background until this week. To rebuild public trust, Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper must disclose what they knew and when. Why wasn't this information released sooner? What is the full truth of the matter? Given the severity of the event, such crucial details should have surfaced within days, especially with the security system fully engaged in uncovering the facts. Both Yvette Cooper and Sir Keir Starmer must clarify their knowledge of the case and their handling of the protests that followed. They failed to address Parliament or respond to legitimate public questions. When confronted during Prime Minister's questions in the Commons, Sir Keir accused Conservative leadership candidates of undermining the police. However, information about such a grave atrocity would have been relayed immediately to the Prime Minister and Home Secretary. Downing Street has denied that the government withheld information, stressing that charging decisions were made independently by the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. The Prime Minister emphasised the importance of allowing the police and prosecutors to carry out their duties without interference, including in the challenging Southport case. But the pressing question remains, why isn't this issue being raised daily by outlets like the BBC? As Dan rightly pointed out, the public has a choice, as do Tory leadership candidates. They can either support the police in their difficult work or choose to undermine them. It's a choice that cannot be ignored. Transparency and accountability are essential if trust in the government is to be restored. Oh, I know which side I'm on, Starmer added. Mr. Hall, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, criticised the lack of transparency by the government and law enforcement regarding the suspect in the Southport attack. He highlighted an 8-hour gap on the day of the killings, during which no information about the individual's identity, name, or background was disclosed. This vacuum of information allowed false rumours to spread on social media, including claims that the perpetrator was an asylum seeker who had recently arrived in Britain. In reality, Ruda Cabana was born in the UK to Rwandan parents. Mr. Hall stressed the importance of preventing damaging misinformation from circulating online, warning that false information shared for personal agendas risks undermining critical investigations. The government must understand, and surely does, that when mainstream media fails to provide timely details, social media steps in to fill the void, he said. I always advise the government and police to share what they can. If there's information you can release, put it out there. Be cautious, but don't default to "we can't say anything" due to ongoing investigations. Often, there's plenty that can be made public. According to Mr. Hall, police are beginning to understand that merely announcing charges without further explanation is inadequate in today's world. Disturbingly, mobs have also taken to the streets of Suffolk, targeting the same police officers who courageously responded to the tragic attack on those girls. Reflecting on this, Mr. Hall noted how he personally met those officers upon their return the following afternoon. He advised that the Police and Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, carefully assess what information can be withheld to avoid jeopardizing a fair trial, but emphasized that withholding should only occur when absolutely necessary and in the public interest. A former senior counter-terror officer weighed in, asserting that the Home Secretary would have been immediately informed if evidence of ricin or terrorist materials had been uncovered. Not sharing this information would constitute a significant departure from standard protocol. The officer explained that such findings would typically be reported to counter-terrorism police in the Northwest, who would then notify Matt Dukes, head of UK counter-terrorism policing, before informing the Home Office. This process underscores the seriousness of ensuring that crucial information is communicated appropriately and in a timely manner. Without transparency, public trust in these institutions risks further erosion. Unless it posed a significant risk to public safety, such information would not typically be shared with the Prime Minister. However, the former officer suggested that in a high-profile case like this, it is highly likely Number 10 was informed. The issue highlights the problem with an opaque and unaccountable system. When the Speaker of the House is tasked with protecting matters deemed to be in the national interest, it places them in an incredibly difficult position. And this is reflective of broader issues in the justice system. The former officer added that it is generally appropriate for politicians to avoid discussing specific details in such cases. This remains an active police investigation. Charges have been brought, but more could follow. Politicians have no role interfering in the judicial process. That responsibility lies with the Attorney General and the Director of Public Prosecutions. Justice must take its course, and politicians should remain uninvolved, the officer said. Downing Street reiterated that the timing of the charges was entirely at the discretion of the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. Merseyside police revealed that a search of Ruda Cabana's home in Banks, Lancashire, following the attack on 29 July, uncovered traces of a biological toxin and an Al-Qaeda training manual titled Military Studies in the Jihad Against the Tyrants. A disparity in the handling of Islamist activity compared to far-right extremism has also been noted. This is evident in Keir Starmer's emphasis on the far right during his commentary on the riots. The National Counter-Terrorism and Policing Unit has refrained from categorizing the knife attack as a terrorist act. Legally, for an incident to be defined as terrorism, it must meet specific criteria, including threats of severe violence, substantial property damage, or actions intended to influence the government, instill fear in the public, or promote a political, religious, racial, or ideological agenda. Liz Truss has drawn parallels between her own experiences and those faced by Donald Trump in the US. She pointed to the entrenched power of institutions like the Federal Reserve, America's equivalent of the Bank of England, and the Congressional Budget Office, their counterpart to the Office of Budget Responsibility, which she argued have accumulated influence over time and are resistant to change. Truss expressed her belief that the UK urgently needs a leader as bold and unapologetic as Trump, someone who can challenge the status quo and prioritise the public's interests. Does Liz Truss strike you as the Prime Minister Britain needed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.